Hello and welcome back to the VCE PE Kings, the only YouTube channel dedicated to improving your results in the new VCE PE curriculum. Today's video is looking at resistance training. In the coming slides, there are 3 pictures of world-class athletes. The first 5 people who write their names in the comments section below will receive an email containing a free practice sack for Unit 4 Outcome 1 that is only available here on the VCE PE Kings. Without taking any more time, let's get stuck into resistance training. So what is resistance training? It's actually a form of training that causes muscle to contract against an external resistance. Now, often when we think about resistance training, we think of free weights because when we go to the gym, that's what we see a lot of people doing. But obviously there are a whole bunch of other different forms that resistance training can take, including weight machines. So obviously if you've been to the gym, you would have seen the weight machines sitting in the gym as well. So we're not going to talk about those too much, but obviously they provide a resistance for our muscles to contract against. Medicine ball training. So using medicine balls to create the resistance that we want to make sure our muscles are working hard. Body weight training. So things like push-ups, sit-ups, dips, chin-ups, all those sorts of exercises there are definitely creating resistance for our muscles to work against, but only using the weight of our body to do so. And resistance bands. So if you haven't seen resistance bands before, they are rubber tubes or pieces of rubber that we can tie around things and use those to create resistance for our muscles to work against. Resistance training is pretty versatile, and it does allow us to work on a number of different fitness components. So the ones that we're going to look at today are muscular strength, muscular power, and muscular endurance. Before we do look at those 3 though, we do need to understand a couple of really important key terms. The first one is load. So load is the amount of resistance that we are going to lift, such as a 10 kilogram dumbbell. The load can be altered depending on what we want to do, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But sometimes load may also be, the words weight and resistance might be used for the word load. Repetition. So repetitions are often shortened to the term reps. And what we have to understand is that it is one complete movement of an exercise. So in the example I have here is the push-ups. The person starts with their hands on the ground, their feet on the ground, their arms nice and straight. They bend their elbows, get down nice and low, and then push back up until their arms are straight again. And that is one repetition of the exercise. Sets are made up of a predetermined number of reps. So for example, if I was going to get you to do some push-ups, I'll say for you to go and do 10 push-ups. Okay? Your set would be once you've got those 10 done. And in a training program, we often then say, okay, we're going to be doing 3 sets of these. And in between the sets, we have some rest, which we'll talk about in a minute. The number of reps in a set can vary greatly depending on what outcomes you're trying to get from your program. And we'll discuss that a little bit later on in the presentation. So rest is pretty obvious. Rest is a recovery time, and it's the recovery time we have between our sets. 1 repetition maximum, or 1 RM, is the heaviest load that you are able to do in a particular exercise for 1 repetition. Now, this is really important so we can actually work out how much weight we should be lifting during our workouts. And the last one we're going to be looking at is contraction speed, and that's how quickly the muscle is contracting. Now, with some of these fitness components, we want to really make sure the muscle contracts quickly, whilst other ones we want it to contract slowly. And again, we'll discuss that on each slide as it comes up. So the first thing we're looking at today is muscular strength. And as I mentioned before, we have 3 athletes in our presentation today. Here is the first one. So obviously he is an athlete that has lots of muscular strength. So if you know his name, fantastic, you're good to go. Now what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at the load, reps, sets, rest, contraction speed, and how long we need to recover between each session. So, as I mentioned before, 1 repetition maximum is really important. Now, if we're working on muscular strength, we want to work at 60 to 90% of our 1 RM. Now, that's quite a heavy weight, okay? So, to get muscular strength, we want to be lifting very heavy weights. When we lift heavy weights, we can't do it for that many repetitions. So, depending on the athlete, we're going to be doing between 1 and 5 reps in each of our sets. We want to have 2 to 6 sets, and we want to have quite a long recovery time because if we go back to our energy systems, we want all of our phosphocreatine stores to be recovered so we can then give a maximal effort again in the next set. Now, the contraction speed is slow, and the reason why the contraction speed needs to be slow here is because we are lifting such heavy weights. There is a law that says the slower the contraction, the more force that can be produced, which means obviously the faster the contraction, the less force that can be produced. So we are trying to produce lots of force because we have lots of weight, so therefore the contraction speed needs to be nice and slow. Now, this sort of training is quite damaging to your muscles, hence why we have lots of muscle growth, because the muscle's broken down and then repaired during our recovery time. But if we don't allow for enough recovery time, the muscles aren't going to repair, and then we're going to either increase our likelihood of injury, or we're not going to see the gains that we actually want to see. So it should have at least 48 hours between each session. Now, in saying that, quite a lot of elite athletes, just like this man that you can see in the picture there, they would be in the gym every single day. And the way they do that is they work certain body parts each day. So, for example, I might want to work my biceps and my back on Mondays, and then Tuesdays I can do my quads and my abs, or however you want to split it up. And different bodybuilders and different people that work on muscular strength have different sessions on that. But what they make sure they do is they do not train the same muscle group in 2 concurrent days. So there's a rest there, but they're just working on other parts of their body. So the second image, this one's probably going to be the hardest one for you. Obviously a high jumper, so check that one out. And obviously muscular power is very important for a high jumper because they do need to have that explosive power to get off the ground. Now, the load is a little bit lighter when we're talking about muscular power. We're talking about 30 to 60% of the 1 RM, and we'll talk about why in a minute. Reps between 1 and 6, I would probably say 6, but again, every individual works a little bit differently. Sets, you want between 3 and 5 sets. And again, we need to make sure our recovery time is long enough for us to replenish a fair amount of our phosphocreatine stores. So we have 2 to 3 minutes. Now we know 3 minutes is basically 100% recovery of our PC stores, so that might be a good time to work with. Now, the contraction speed is very different here, fast. And the reason why that is because muscular power, if we remember, we need to be able to put a lot of force into something very, very quickly. So the contractions need to be rapid. Now, looking back at the load, we're talking about 30 to 60% of our 1 RM, which is not that heavy. Okay, that then allows us to have the contraction speed that is fast. If we put too much weight to lift, we're not going to be able to contract our muscles very quickly. So therefore, it works out very well there. And again, we need to make sure that we recover, so at least 24 to 48 hours of recovery time between workouts, sorry. The third one that we're going to be talking about is muscular endurance. And again, here is our third athlete. I'm probably guessing if you're doing VCE now, you weren't around when this person ran in the Sydney Olympics, but very, very famous Australian athlete. So hopefully you do know who this is. So muscular endurance obviously is the ability to have a muscle contract over and over and over again. So obviously we're talking about being able to deal with hydrogen ions quite well. So this training needs to put our bodies into a situation where we are accumulating hydrogen ions so our body becomes better at dealing with the presence of those. So the load between 30 and 70% of your 1 RM. Now the reps is where it's really important here. We need to have high amount of reps because we want to replicate the idea of the muscle contracting over and over again, which is going to build up our hydrogen ions. Again, the load can't be too high here because if the load's too high, you are not capable of getting the number of reps that you need. Sets between 1 and 3. I would normally say 3 for all of these. It's a pretty safe number. If you're a beginner especially, 3 is pretty good for everything. As you become more elite at a particular thing, then you might want to change it slightly from there. Now rest 1 to 2 minutes of passive recovery. Again, we want those muscles to be really fatigued and working hard. If we give them too much of a break, okay, it's harder to fatigue them and put them into the position where they have to make an adaptation. The contraction speed is moderate. It's not really that important as far as muscular endurance is concerned, but moderate's good because the slower we lift, the harder the muscles work and puts it into an endurance phase. As far as recovery, again, 24 to 48 hours, because we have to understand that we are doing damage to our muscles in doing these training sessions, and we need to allow our body to fully recover these muscles before we use them again. Otherwise, we're increasing the likelihood of injury. So, a quick summary. For muscular strength, we want a high load and low reps. For muscular power, we want a lower load, but we really need to focus on the quick contraction speed. For muscular endurance, we want a medium to low load, but lots of reps because we want to make that muscle contract over and over again. A recovery time is extremely important in all three of those, because if we don't have enough recovery time, we'll increase the likelihood of injuries. Warm-ups should be completed. I didn't mention this earlier, but they should be completed before resistance training. Otherwise, we are increasing the likelihood of injury during these sessions. And a cool down, including static stretches, should also be undertaken afterwards because we want to sort of elongate those muscles back out to keep our flexibility at a decent level. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe, and please make sure you do let your friends know of this channel, because I'm trying to make sure I'm helping as many people as possible. Also, I'm now on school holidays. I've finished my reports, which is fantastic, so I'm able to get out quite a few videos in the coming weeks. So please make sure you keep checking regularly to see those new videos. And last of all, please make sure you comment below with the name of those 3 athletes, so I'll be able to send some people your prizes. Thanks once again. I hope you have a great day, and I hope you've learned something from this presentation. Bye.